where you from, if it's outside of Vallejo, and how you identify yourself.
Okay, age.
The range is fine. You could say you're
I'm
Gen
joking. I
X
don't care.
like me.
All right. Okay. So you ready? Okay. So my name is Thomas Bilbo, and I live here in Vallejo. I am 50 years old, just turned. So I'm a fresh 50. And I am from South Mississippi, born and raised there until I was mid-20s. And then I moved to Atlanta, and then I moved out to San Francisco, and then moved out here in 2004 into Vallejo.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was primarily raised in a, not primarily, I was raised in a Christian household, Southern Baptist / missionary Baptist, hence some warped stuff with me. My grandfather was a preacher for about 75 years, and my mother, of course, was a preacher's kid, so she was the worst of the bunch. I was a preacher's grandkid, not far off the mark there either. My father came from a sort of religious family as well. His father was a deacon and also a gospel singer of note, as well as a carpenter. Can't get more Christ-like than that. And so, yeah, so, being raised in the South there's a lot of, oh, bless your heart, and very sweet to your face, and then be like, can you believe what you wore, kind of thing going on. And yeah, so I was raised like that. We would go to church every Sunday night, and Wednesdays too. And then when revival would come, we would be revived as well. And so yeah, we were really involved with the church. Then we also helped found a church near where I grew up, because my grandfather's church was not really local to us. We were out in the country. And so we helped found a church that was just like a mile away. But yeah, I grew up and always knew that there was something a little different, maybe a little gay about me. But I will say I came from a loving family. They were not too traumatized when I came out of the closet. My mom, I think, took it the worst, where she didn't talk to me for like 2 weeks, and then she let me know everything was okay whenever I went to borrow a shirt from my dad, and it was a little awkward. But then she goes, well, you just ought to leave it unbuttoned. Isn't that what you gay guys like anyway? The men will like you better. I was just like, well, I guess we're over that now. Yeah, so that's sort of that. My dad, he was just concerned making sure I was safe and okay. My grandfather, he did not have a really big problem with it, because he was always of the type, love the sinner, hate the sin kind of thing. But he also, he was not a hellfire and brimstone type preacher. He was more of a coming from an angle of love and respect for everyone. And yeah, so that's that. My grandmother, his wife, she was a little more sort of, but the weirdest thing was my first partner and I, we actually went and had dinner with them, just mano a mano, and that was some weirdness, but it was well. So I don't think, after that there was, once you get through those two hurdles, it's like, forget everyone else. If you don't accept it, then hit the road. Because the main people in my life are okay with it. So, and that's that was my Mississippi kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of there. My grandfather was, I wouldn't say big in the Republican Party, but he was known in the Republican Party of South Mississippi. And he was also well known in the Baptist world, because early on in, like, I think it was the 50s or maybe it was the 60s, the Southern Baptists and the Missionary Baptists split, because they were at one time, I think, just like the American Baptists or something like that. And they split and they became the Southern Baptists and the Missionary Baptists. And he was one of 5 preachers that helped to arrange that split. So he was quite well known. And yeah, my mom and dad, they were a loving family. They were together until my father passed, and then my mother just recently passed last year because of COVID. Yeah, I mean, it was a loving household. We weren't rich, but we weren't destitute. We had property. What does they say? Land rich, but cash poor. But I was raised on a farm, so we had chickens, cows, rabbits, pigs, and a horse once. But primarily we had cows and chickens and pigs until I was like 11. And then we sold off / butchered everything, and all the chickens we got rid of really quick, because we didn't buy, we never went to the grocery store to buy meat until like I was 11. Everything was when they talk about eating local, we were eating like from just outside the house. And yeah, that was, and we would have a garden. My dad had a tractor and he would plant a garden. My mama, and that's Southern for mother, would always say, he knows how to plant, he just never takes into consideration the picking. So he was all about the planting, but when it came time to pick, it was like, well, that's your job. But yeah, we would grow corn, squash, okra, peas, and beans. Butter beans are the worst to pick because you basically got to crawl on the ground to pick them. They're very low bush. We'd have tomatoes. My grandfather on my father's side, the gospel singer, my grandmother, his wife, my grandmother's father was known as Tomato Tom, because he used to grow fields of tomatoes. And my grandfather, that's the way they would make additional money. They would grow fields of tomatoes too. I mean, it was just one field, but it was terraced into like 5 sections because it was on the side of a hill. We actually come from, I grew up on a hill in South Mississippi that's actually called Bilbo Hill. Because my grandfather was the first to settle there. Anyway, so yeah, they would grow tomatoes, and he even had these boards that my sister has in her house. They were supposed to come to me, but that's in Mississippi. I'm here. That had pegs. That he was a carpenter, so he made these pegs and everything. And they would create these cold frames, and then they would use these boards to make the little holes where the tomato plants would go, and then they fill it back in with soil, and then that's the way they grew their tomato plants to go out into the field. And it was cold frames with wooden sides and big glass windows. And so you would prop up the windows or let them down, whatever, depending on the temperature. But they would start that in like the mid to early February timeframe and get the tomatoes so they would be first to the market. And they grew Gulf State Market, which is a type of tomato. It was not a hybrid tomato, but it was called a market tomato. It's still, I have the seeds now that you can order from tomato growers. And you can actually get it, and they're about like this, which is, if you think about a mouse, it's a little bit smaller than a typical mouse. And they were very hardy to ship, but very high acid, so they had a big tomato punch. Yeah, my mom, she used to love them. Yeah, so that was what they would grow. That was primarily the farming and agriculture. Of course, they had corn and all that kind of stuff. But and then my dad, he would grow them too, but we didn't, of course, have fields of them. We had a 2-acre garden spot, but then we also had a 5.5-acre field that we would grow watermelons in. and then it turned into blueberries. So that was sort of my idealized life on the farm in South Mississippi. The rest of the property that they had was in pine timber.
That was
Um,
your life during the 70s,
uh,
growing up?
well, 70s and 80s. Yeah. So
Nice.
I was born in 1970, and
Okay.
I moved away in when did I move? Well, I moved out of the house in 92 and lived in the nearest town was called Picayune, Mississippi, which if you know New Orleans, which it's not that far from New Orleans, there is a newspaper there of note called the Times-Picayune. And it was founded by a lady, and she married the guy. The Picayune was the original paper, and she had that paper. She was one of the first female editors and newspaper publishers, I think, in America, especially in the South. And then she married her competitor, who had the Times. And then with that marriage, they created the Times-Picayune. But she had a house in this town that at the time, I can't remember the name of it, but she wrote a little story about it, saying, I'm at my house in this town. It's on the Hobollachitted River, which means frothy water in Indian. And she says, this town is so quaint. It's like a picayune. It's small, but something that you still cherish, because a picayune is actually a coin, a Spanish coin, from way back when. And they were still sort of circulating, not really as like commerce, but people had them, and they were like, oh, this is a picayune. It was much more valuable as an oddity than it was as a coin. But she wrote that story, and then the town just was like, we're going to be called Picayune. So fast forward to today, and Picayune, the definition of it is little or worthless. So all the people, I would joke and I would say, do you really know what your high school stands for? Because I came from the country, and I went to Pearl River Central High School out in the country, which was like the rural high school. I mean, we still had a lot of kids because they came from everywhere. That if you weren't in one of the two cities in the county, you came to PRC, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, we're from Picayune." I'm like, "Do you know what you're saying?" And a little education really shut up the boastfulness of them. But yeah, so that's sort of that was the life there. I mean, I let's see, I went to, like I said, I went to PRC, and then um I was pretty much not anything really special in my junior high years. I worked in the cafeteria. I was one of those folks, but it was just so I could get out of PE. Because being a gay kid and going to PE was sort of, it's like, ugh. But I would get to go to the cafeteria. They needed help, and students were allowed to be there, and you learn some skills. So it was where I learned to do some cooking. But of course, most of the skills that we learned were like dishwashing, and moving big bags of flour and things like that. But they did teach us some stuff too. And then the girls that would let serve, I was always, if I worked the lunch hour, I was always in the dish room, which is where the kids come and throw their trays at you, and then you have to blah blah, and it was just awful. But yeah, so that was pretty good. And then in high school, really wasn't anything in ninth grade, but then in 10th grade, I got into the yearbook, and I was there for 3 years, and I was the editor my senior year. And we also put out the newspaper, so it was yearbook / newspaper, and we would put out the little school newspaper, which only came out every like, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks. It was as a flexible schedule, and it was just like a mimeograph kind of thing.
Oh, that smell.
Oh, and the feel of it. When you're in the South and in Mississippi, we did not have air conditioning. These kids these days, they have air conditioning. We were excited when we got fans, ceiling fans. We were like, ceiling fans, we're so uptown. But whenever we do the mimeograph machine, because it used an alcohol-based thing to put the ink on the paper and stuff, we take it off and go, oh, it's so cold.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's sort of that was that. Yeah, and being the editor of the paper, I did the sports section my first year, which I was because I was the only guy. They're like, you could do sports. I was just like, I'd rather do like something with the girls, you know. But I did the sports, and then I found out, oh, that means I get to go into the locker room. There was a bonus, but it also it helped because I really learned to do photography, and sports photography, and so that was pretty good. I got hit in the face with a basketball about 3 times. Never got tackled on the field that first year. I got tackled a couple of times the next. Um, and the biggest thing was always to hold the camera up. It was like, I don't care what you do to me, just don't damage the camera.
Save the equipment.
Yeah, exactly. Because, well, for us, it was an expensive piece of hardware. You know, a school without a lot of money is, you know, you got to make up stuff. Anyway, but yeah, that was quite interesting. And then so I kept doing that, and then in college I was on the yearbook. It was a scholarship that I got, and also in the PR department. I went to a junior college, which also is a community college, but it was called Pearl River Junior College at the time, PRJC. And they actually had dorms, and I stayed in the dorm, and it was, you know, it was just like a regular college, but it was not a university, but you transferred to the university, and that's what I did. I went up to the University of Southern Mississippi. But when I was at USM, I was a non-traditional student because I would work full-time and then just take night classes or a couple of late day classes to finish up my degree. But I, again, whenever I was doing photos and stuff for the college, the first year they had a girl who was doing the photos, and she was great, but then she got tackled twice at a football game. She was like, forget this, I'm done. And so our the PR director and the assistant director, they were like, Tom, we know you have the skills, so you need to go and do these things. I'm just like, those guys are animals, they're gonna kill me. Sure enough, I got tackled a couple of times. The worst was I got there. I have a picture of Brandon Tarter. I remember him. He's this tall boy, super tall boy, and you can see him. He's coming at me, and right in the view, you see a basketball, and that's whenever I took the photo, and that's whenever I was like, shit. Right into me, the basketball hit me and the camera. I had like a bruise on the side of my face, and then he proceeded to just fall into me. And he was like, I want to say like 6'5", 6'7", and was not light on the hoof. And I was chubby, but I was not like I was not a small wallflower. I was substantial, but having that much crash into you, because I'm only 5'8", having that much crash into you, you're like, Jesus Christ. And I just was like laying there, and I didn't open my eyes. I was just like, I think I'm bleeding. And I remember the coach came over. What was his name? I forget his name. But the coach came over, a couple other people came over, and they were like, we got to call an ambulance. I was like, no, I'm okay. Just, I'm trying to like breathe. And they were like, okay, so is my face bleeding? They're like, no. I'm like, then I opened my eyes. I was like, okay, then I'm fine. But the next day, it was like this massive bruise. And that's whenever they said that after that, they said, you cannot be on the court. You have to be, or you can't be right at the court line in basketball games. And then they also changed that up for football games too.
Yeah.
But you know, it was all about getting the shot, and that shot I won. I won for that shot, and of a state contest for that shot, and also for a shot of a kid eating an apple, for us, and a story that I wrote about how non-traditional students at the college were having to arrange daycare and everything that went along with finding childcare while you go to school and everything that went along with that. And so, yeah, I won an award with that at state. So that was pretty good. And that was with that was with junior colleges, aka community colleges, and universities. So I thought I got first place in, I think it was human interest, and then I got first place, or no, I got second place in sports photography. But anyway, so that was that, and then yeah. So now, what else do you want to know? That's pretty much me up until I started working full time.
Okay, so what did you do full time?
Oh, okay. Now we're there. So
Yeah.
is this just really about me? I mean,
Yeah, this is it's going to be available for people to find out about local people in Vallejo, but
oh,
we're
okay.
hoping to keep this for posterity. So, that's, the questions about timely things that are happening right now are
Okay.
going to be involved and such. And so you could look back on this, 20 years from now, you'd be like, who's that guy?
Yeah. I'll be like, who is that smooth skinned young man versus me who will eventually be like a Shar-Pei. Anyway, so yeah, so then after I finished up at the community college, the summer between when I was supposed to start full time at university and when I was and ended at community college, my mom was like, "Well, you should get a job." It was really so I could get out of the house. I was like, "But Ma," she was like, "No, either you get a job or you go back on the tractor." Because what I used to do in the summers during high school was I drove our family's tractor and I would what's called bush hog or clip other people's fields and I'd make money that way. And you make some good money. But and instead of doing that, I got a job and it turned out to be a job that lasted 8 years. They paid for the rest of my education because I did it part-time. And they would give me, if I got an A, they pay for it 100%. A B, they paid 50. A C, they only gave you a quarter. A D, there's like no. So it was, that was a pretty good deal. And so then I wound up in my college career. I went for computer science, but then I liked the newspaper stuff so much that I also went into business communications. So I actually have a dual degree in Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science and a Bachelor of Arts in business communications. Because I couldn't make up my mind and I already had enough for everything, so I just did it both. And they gave me both of them. Well, they didn't give me. I had to fight for it and work for it. And then it was a small printer interface manufacturer that you wouldn't think in a small town like Picayune there would be any kind of technology, but there was. There was actually, we were not that far from the test site, John Stennis Space Center, which that's where they test the rocket engines for actually anything that goes through NASA. I also think SpaceX tests their engines there. They have everything set up so they can just test just the engines. And they're on a industrial canal, so the canal actually, they can ship the engines because these are not like a car engine. They're a huge rocket engine. They ship them in by barge and then they can offload them, test them, and put them back on and go. But yeah, so I tried to get a job at the test site thinking that would be so great, but they were like, "You're not even done with college yet." But this printer interface manufacturer, they were like, "Well, we need like a newsletter and we need some writing for our manuals and stuff." And I was like, "Okay." So I took it. It was supposed to be just for like a summer thing, and then they were like, "We really want you to stay on," and so I did. And then I started doing marketing and communication stuff for them, and then I did trade shows as well as, so I did all this other stuff as well as, and then yeah, so I would travel as well as I went to school. But then after I finished school, because it took me 6 years instead of 4 for that because I did it part-time. Yeah, I would travel let's see, I'd start travel. It was spring and fall. I'd have two big travel junkets. So I'd do like 4 trade shows each time.
Mm.
And I would just go on the road and then come back like 4 or 5 weeks later. Never really saw seasons transition between winter and spring. And whenever I get back, it would always be full blown spring. There was no transition. The same thing with fall. I never saw the leaves gradually turn. But anyway, so that was sort of fun. And then while I was at that company, that's whenever I got involved in the community. And there was a local restaurant called Po' Boy Junction. Oh, good food. But they were doing a Christmas for children, is what they called it, on Christmas Eve. And they would bring in 3 shifts of kids to feed them. And they were looking for a Santa Claus. And since I went there a lot, and I had not a thin body, the owner, she was like, "Hey, Tom, have you ever thought about," and that was in 1995. No, Christmas of 94 or 95. And that's whenever I did my first Santa gig, and I've been doing it every year except for one since then. Playing Santa. Now that year I did not have a beard. I actually I bought a beard and I glued it on my face thinking, oh, this would be great. Worst rash ever. Never again. Because I use spirit gum, but I'm very sensitive. And having that on my face, whenever I pulled it off, I was like, oh, and I washed my face and everything. I woke up the next morning, it was a red imprint where that had been. And then it's Christmas Day, I go out to my mom's and she's like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you?" Wouldn't let me fix my plate. She was like, "You're gonna crust up and get into the food." And so, but that was fun. And then she and I got stuck, and that's whenever she made me my first Santa Claus outfit for the next year, for '96. And I grew up my beard. And my beard was longer than it is now, because I started growing that beard in May, and I had it down to like below my chest. And I was doing trade shows with that, and my boss Larry was like, "You really should shave." I was just like, "I'm doing this for Santa. That's not happening." But I found out in doing that there's a lot of people that like bearded men, both men and women. And at the time I was a little questioning about who I was. And so I was playing both sides. Well, pretty much playing just the hetero side. But then whenever I started seeing the guys, there was like, gay guys and stuff getting interested, I was just like, oh. And, so that's sort of where it all went wrong, according to my mother. I knew that beard was going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, the first time I ever saw you, you were playing Santa in the parade here in Vallejo. I'd say 5. I've been here for 5 years, a little over 5 years now. So it had to be that first Christmas in 15.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after that and seeing you here at the library that I found out that you were my neighbor and that you only live 3 houses down from me.
I know, just around the corner.
Works out really great.
Or as we say in the South, spitting distance.
Yeah. It can happen,
Yeah. So I've kept the beard. Except for 2013, I had a beard and I was playing Santa Claus, but then I took a year off because at that time my dad died right at that time. And I just was like, I need to take a year off. And so I didn't come back until 2014. And because I at that time I was doing some stuff with the parade. I would be in the parade or whatever, but then I was really the Santa Claus for Loma Vista Farm and the museum. And also Vallejo Together and a couple of care facilities. But then they stopped because it was like, no, we don't want people going from room to room to room, because that's just taking stuff. And that was whenever colds were getting bad for older folks and stuff. It always was, but they were really paying attention to it, finding out what was causing that. But yeah, so that was that. So I've always done it I've only ever done one paid gig, and that was for a person in San Francisco. Her assistant is a friend of mine who she saw me on his Facebook page, and she wanted me to come Christmas Eve for her family and her daughter. And I was like, I don't know, Christmas Eve. Well, they made me an offer that was obscene. And so I went, but little did I know, if she had just led with this, it would not have had to been obscene. Her daughter's autistic, and so she can't go to like the malls and stuff, too much stimulus, you know. And so I go there and I play Santa for them, and then prior to going and seeing her daughter, she pulls me into the kitchen, you know, from the side, and she gives me a wad of 20s that's like that, and I'm just like, oh my God. That's whenever I realized I don't have any pockets in this suit my mama made me, other than in the back on my butt. So I just put them back there. And it was this, literally, it was this roll of 20s. And I was like, damn. But yeah, so, but the little girl, she, you know, I had gotten a background on everyone that was going to be at their dinner party, and I learned it. And so I was able to talk about each person there, asking them certain things about their life. And a couple of them, there were a couple of people, they had no idea that I was coming. They were just like, what the heck? But her assistant had given me a dossier of who I was there with a picture, so I knew the names. And it was quite fun. But the little girl, as we were talking and stuff, then she came up and she hugged me as I was leaving. And her mother, again, I didn't know she was autistic until after. Her mother, I heard on the side, she goes, I was like, oh, maybe that was wrong. I shouldn't have done. And so then she starts asking me questions. And so if you are familiar with autistic people or people who are on the spectrum, you know that they have a very analytical mind. And so she's driving down to see if I'm really Santa. She's asking questions. And I'm like, And so her mother was like, well, Santa's got to go, and shoving me out the door. And as she gets me to the door, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for her to hug me. She says, oh, that's okay, don't worry about it. I'll tell Michael. And so I go. Well, Michael sends me a note. He says, she said you were perfect, and that she wanted you to know that you were the first person that her daughter has hugged in like 2 years. And I was like, oh my God, I feel so sorry. I felt so like, oh my gosh, I'm like such a horrible homewrecker. But it was good. It was good. So yeah. But that's the only time I've ever been paid. And it was because it was Christmas Eve, and I was like, I'm ready to get this thing off, because normally I trim this. This year I'm in a political campaign, and all my material had to be ready for before Christmas, so they got this view. So I'm keeping it while I'm doing some online video conferencing and stuff like that, so that I
So what
look
do
like
you
the picture.
tell me about what you're running for?
Yeah, so I am actually running to be a delegate for the Democratic Party in California. This will be my second time to run for a delegate. The first time I was elected, and that was in 2016? Yeah, 2015, 2016. I was also a delegate for Bernie at that time, whenever he ran, and to the DNC for that. But I was a delegate for the California Democratic Party as well. And you're elected for 2 years. And then I did not run the next 2 years because I was focused on the other work that I do here in the county, which is with Solano Pride Center. We were going through a transition, and so I needed to focus on that. So I was like, well, I can't really do that. So I kept up my duties with the Stonewall Democratic Club of Solano County. But I decided not to go for the state office because that was going to be too much. But this year I decided to go for it, and I'm running on a slate with some other folks that we really agree on all the important issues that we consider important and that most people would consider important, like COVID, housing justice, environmental justice, and police reform. And so we're running as a slate, and hopefully we'll win. We'll find out probably about 2 weeks, because it's a vote by mail because of the pandemic, which is something that we had to adapt. I worked on several campaigns over this past year for city council, school board, and mayor, a couple of different mayors here in the county, and city council people in the county as well, because I serve on the Solano Democratic Central Committee as their information resource officer. So I actually supported a lot of different campaigns in the county with technical stuff and like voter registration data and things like that. What else? So I'm running to be a delegate to the California Democratic Party, and yeah, that's it. I'm also running to be on what's called the executive board. So it's if you get the highest votes in your assembly district, because we're elected by assembly districts, then you'll be on the executive board. So there's 14 people per assembly district, and only one gets to be on the executive board. So my goal is to get enough votes to be the top vote getter, and then I'm on the executive board. So we'll see. Yeah, so that's sort of my political side. Is that where I find my bliss is in nonprofit and charity work. And that's where I do things for Solano Pride. I'm the chairman of the board for that nonprofit, and I help them. I'm actually sort of the chief information officer. I manage their systems, but then also run the board and help to set the strategic vision for the nonprofit, which is sort of important because, especially in the time of a pandemic, having to adapt and make sure our staff was okay, because we do have a staff of 6 people, which is not a big staff, but for a small country pride center, that's pretty good. And we have to make sure that everyone's okay. But we pivoted really well when the lockdown or our stay-at-home order came in place, and I was able to get us all up and running. So we all had individual phone numbers through Google Voice, and we used the Google Suites option, and we were able to just pivot everything online, going from in-person to online. It took about 2 weeks, but we were able to do it really quick, and make sure it was safe. That's the other thing with pride centers and stuff for the LGBTQ community, is that it has to be safe, because you have people who are marginalized and who come sometimes from an area of trauma. And so we want to make sure they have a safe space, especially the youth. We do have a large youth contingent. It's over 100 strong, and they're coming in. We have a trans youth group and a all-inclusive youth group. But and then we also have a senior youth group, and then we have some HIV support, and then we do a weekly cocktail hour at 5 on Fridays, 5:30 on Fridays, where we just Zoom in and just enjoy each other's company for a little bit, and really sort of talk about the latest gossip. Yeah, so that's about it.
That's you.
Yeah, I think that is me.
That's like a top layer with a couple little V parts. Yeah.
Now what?
The other thing I wanted to know, because we want to keep this for the future, and people want to know what it was like in the COVID times. So it's been about a year since the first case came out, and our numbers are staggering in the United States. But how has it affected you personally? And yeah, let's just start with that.
Well, personally, I can say that it's a real cruddy time. But just all in general. But adding to that you had someone who was in the highest office of the land that was denying, calling it a hoax, not doing anything to really help the nation as a whole. It wasn't until we just went through this last, or we went through the inauguration on Wednesday, which was 2 days ago, for those of you in history in Futureland, of Joe Biden, that after that after his inauguration, I mean, literally, I was holding my breath until Kamala was sworn in. I'm like, okay. And then when Joe was sworn in, it was like, oh, okay. And yeah, so we, that was it wasn't until that afternoon that I realized, that knot I had in my chest, wow, that's crazy, it's gone. So for like 4 years I've been like,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
yeah.
great.
But anyway, so yeah, so we yeah, it wasn't until after that I realized that, oh my God, I've been living with such sort of stress. And it's just like, add COVID to that and have it transition from going into the office every how often did I go to the office? 4 days a week on the ferry, where there was a group of people that I associated with, and you get that sort of common space where you're like, oh hey, how you doing, blah blah blah, and you talk to everyone. And being a Southern boy and also a preacher's grandkid, we learned how to interface and to like be open to people, and we never meet a stranger, because you're trying to win them over to something. Anyway, so we um but yeah, but having to adjust from that within like a day, because I was in the office on the 16th of March, and that's whenever San Francisco went into shutdown. And then on the 19th of March is when Solano County went in, or was it the 18th? It was not long. It was like the Thursday. Solano County went to lockdown. But prior to that, on the 16th, I think it was, no, the week prior to that, that's whenever they said anyone 65 and older should not go out. And we had an individual at Solano Pride who she is an office manager. Dry throat. And we had to adjust for that. That's whenever I was like, okay, everyone just stay home, because our executive director was actually in Cuba when this whole thing went down. So yeah, so I was sort of pitch hitting while he was in Cuba. I was like, all right, everyone go home. I'm gonna get it so you can access everything. Let me know if you need anything, blah blah blah. And yeah, so so I had to oversee the transition for Solano Pride, but then I also had to oversee the transition of my own personal life into working here at home. Luckily, unlike most folks, I have a dedicated office and a desk set up, and because I was working from home either a couple of days a week or at least one full day a week. So it was not too traumatic. I didn't have to invent something. And so that was interesting. The other thing was just realizing that you're not supposed to go out and buy food. You're not supposed to go out and, in the beginning it was like, oh God, every breath we take can kill us. But eventually, you sort of go down, and then we lasted 6 weeks with 2 rolls of paper towel.
Did you get caught up in the toilet paper runs?
Yes, because I had not bought paper towels. I had bought toilet paper like 2 weeks prior to the shutdown, and prior to everything going, oh my God. But I had not bought paper towels, and I was like, oh, I can still get them. No paper towels. But I did find at Smart and Final these cocktail napkins, and they had like 3 packs of them, and so I bought them. And they were like, I don't think we're supposed to let you buy more than one. I was like, no, that was for napkins. This is a bar nap, different. So they let me buy all 3, and so we lasted on bar naps for like 6 weeks. And when you have cats, like we have cats, you go through a lot of paper products to clean up.
Yes. Things.
Yeah. And so that was I was like, oh my God. Luckily with the toilet paper, I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal because we have other things that we use besides toilet paper, bidets. But that was the where I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. But I did buy that first week, I went out and I bought like a lot of protein. We do have a freezer in our basement, and I filled that up because I was just like, no, we gotta buy this stuff. And just I had, and whenever I went to the store, they were like, because I go to Smart and Final, and I don't know, it just feels like my people. And I go there, and they were like, you can only get one bag of flour. I got a 50-pound bag of flour. I'm like, it's one.
It's one.
Yeah. And all these other people are like got their little 5-pound. I'm like, bong. And then the same thing with the I got rice that way too. I was like, it's one. And then they had I think it was 20-pound bag of beans, dried beans. I got one. And so I was like, there, so I was like, all right, we're good. But I had already stocked up our pantry with canned goods, so I wasn't worried about that. But I was just thinking, oh man, if this is gonna really go down south, I'm gonna be making my own yeast, making my own bread, and we're gonna have rice and beans. We're gonna be like, real warriors and everything. It didn't go that bad. But it has been a little odd adjusting to like going to the doctor is not a thing. Going to the dentist, haven't gone to the dentist. So I've been flossing extra well and brushing extra well.
I got a whole bunch of dental work done this last year. So I think it just depends on the dentist. And it's like I was the only person in the building with them at the time kind of stuff. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I'm like, that's too close. Because they have to be like right in your face.
Yeah.
I'm like,
They had the plastic screens and the mask underneath and the whole medical setup. So I kind of felt safe about it.
Yeah,
you gotta be in it. You gotta feel it.
Yeah. So I just was like, I don't have anything that needs major attention.
Yeah.
I don't have anything that's hurting. So it was just for routine cleaning. I'm like, they can wait.
Yeah.
I'm gonna floss extra hard, and I'm and I'm gonna brush like 3 times a day. But and then getting used to ordering stuff online. 'Cause I mean, we order stuff online all the time, but not like groceries.
Yeah, everything.
That was some weird stuff. And we're actually going back to a time where little grocery stores used to deliver groceries. You should always say, oh, I need this, this, and this, and they deliver it. It was the same thing. And so what we do now is we get stuff delivered from Costco, or I order it from Safeway and we go and pick it up, or I go to Smart and Final. That's the only store that I will go into. And in the very beginning, I know it was very strict on how many people could come in. Here in Solano County, they have not been as observant of that, unless you go over to like Contra Costa and you go to Sprouts, because I like they have a good meat department. They have a number clicker, and then they stop you and they make you wait until 2 people come out and you can go in or whatever. But yeah, so that's pretty much life in COVID. I mean, like we've adapted for Solano Pride, because we used to have the Vallejo Gay Network, which we would have monthly potlucks. Well, that got canceled. And those were great times. You get to eat some interesting food, but you get to see people, get to have a little gossip, get to have a little like, oh girl. Yeah. That kind of thing. And then you just get to see, and like if it's someone new, you get to see their house, and it's always a new house. It's always the big thing. Chris and I would usually host twice a year. We'd host July, and then also at Thanksgiving. And July we'd have a barbecue, and Thanksgiving we would have a food drive. And so we'd ask people to bring canned goods. And each year we've always had over 400 pounds worth of food delivered that we take over to Solano County, Solano Contra Costa Food Bank. Yeah. And so that was our big thing. It was was fun. It felt like, we really got the community involved, and they would bring like cases of food. I'm like, it's a little barrel. And so both times the food would be outside of the barrel, and they bring pet food and stuff like that, because they do that too. But yeah, it's been hard getting used to that, because that's been hard. Not having that contact, and especially for someone like me, who I was born and raised in the church, so it's like, you want to see people, you want to touch people, you want to hug them, do all that kind of thing. But then, so that's gone, and then losing my mom, I could not go back home for her funeral. Because of, the funeral home buried her without anyone knowing when they were going to bury her, because they did not want people around. My sisters, they organized a small thing where people came, but they were in a church, and I wouldn't have gone to that anyway, because that was a little crazy. Some of them weren't wearing masks. Southern, hard-headed kind of deniers. That's what we're talking about here. But yeah, so I I couldn't, and I asked my doctors about, because I'm heavier and I've got a few comorbidities, as they call it, that would make me very susceptible and have a worse than normal outcome to COVID. And so they were like, yeah, you can't go on a plane. That would be like really stupid. I was like, okay, we won't go on a plane. But yeah, so that's sort of, and so I was able to see my mother before she died over Zoom and Skype and stuff. So that was pretty good. That too, and she had COPD really bad, and so that's why she had a worse than expected outcome. Because of that, and she had already been experiencing dementia and stuff like that. And she had always, from the day my dad died, she'd been like, I miss you, Daddy, so much, I just want to die. And so she was already like going down, and that was 7 years. But she passed just before her what would it be, her 77th birthday. And it is what it is. But with her, it was not as jarring, as I just had a friend that passed, and that she did not pass of COVID. She passed of just another complication, and that was more jarring than losing my own mother, because it was totally unexpected, and within 2 days she was dead. So that was hard, and not being able to have a proper well, not a proper funeral, but have a regular funeral where you can hug people, that kind of thing, was difficult. And that was a local friend.
Yeah.
But yeah, this whole pandemic, I will say, it's actually, with my partner and I, we've actually grown closer. And we're not dead. Neither one of us has killed the other. So, that's a plus. And, we're eating out of the house more, not out of the house, but eating from the kitchen more than we ever did before, because of everything. And he likes to go out. I like to cook. So I just make it like we're going out, but we're in the living room. What else? Yeah, that's pretty much, I got back into gardening. I had been out of gardening here at the house, for a couple of years, just because of work stuff. I had gotten really busy. But I got back into gardening, had several tomato plants, pepper plants, eggplants, things like that. And I'm planning on doing more of it next year. So we're gonna have a bigger garden. Yeah.
Okay, so how about one last question before we go?
Okay.
When this COVID thing ends, and we all know it's not going to go back to exactly like it was before. What if that means we wear masks in specific places, or whatever the heck that means in the future? We all envision some time when we will be able to go someplace and hug a friend.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of thing. Be able to have the social gatherings like we did before when we have herd immunity or everyone's vaccinated or whatever the heck we get to that point where things and we can go back to what's the first thing you want to do? I mean, is it going to be like the roaring 20s and I'm going to dress up to go out, dress up. But what do you think?
So I know one thing that I did when this whole thing started was I kept my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't fall into the, okay, I'll wake up at 9 and no, I didn't. I still woke up at 5:30. Now it's more like 6, but it's pretty much still early. So I would go down and catch the boat and then go into the office. Right. But and then, quit around like 4:30, 5 o'clock because I would get to work earlier. But so that didn't change too much. But I think the first thing I want to do when we are able to, God, it's I don't know if it's go to a movie, just to see like something other than our TV, or just go out for, as my British partner would say, a proper meal. Because we haven't been able to do that. Like for his birthday, I had arranged for us to have reservations at Mustard's in Napa, a restaurant that he really likes. And then at the last minute, he was like, I'm not comfortable doing that. So I canceled them. And then for my own birthday, having turned 50, well, we had talked about going to Italy. Of course, that got shut down back in March. And I had booked us into the Ahwahnee, which is the big hotel in Yosemite, and had booked us into what's called the library room for 3 nights. And it's a room that has a balcony, it has a living room, a dining room, and a bedroom. It's part of the original apartments for the family that built the hotel. And it has a butler's pantry as well. Not a kitchen, but a butler's pantry where you prepare the food. And it comes with the, they'll bring your meals and stuff. You can actually ask for them to be brought to your hotel room as a dining room. So it was going to be just one of these things. And the thought was, when I booked it, I was like, okay, so we can't go to Italy, but we'll see about getting a massage. We'll just relax. It has a fireplace. They'll build a fire for us. It'll be just lovely. Well, right around October 15th, they start talking about in Yosemite, there's been an outbreak of COVID. So it's like, cancel.
Yeah.
But I think I want to do that. I want to go back to Yosemite, go to Yosemite and stay in the library room, do the stay that I didn't have. And then we've already talked about going to Italy as well.
The traveling that we can't do now.
Yeah. So it's traveling outside of the area. I mean, the furthest we've been from Vallejo has been, it's either Napa or Fairfield. I think it's probably Napa. No, that's only 14 miles. So I guess it would be.
That's almost equal because it's like 12 to Fairfield from here.
Yeah, so I take that back. We did go to the Sprouts over in Pleasant Hill.
What?
That's 16.
An adventure.
I know. That was 16 miles. And it was only because we had to also go to the Best Buy over there to pick up a laptop that is not working right now.
That's that one you were having problems with.
Yeah, and we went. Actually, no, that was the year before last. Oh, God, that's another thing. Is hopefully the days won't run together anymore. There will be some delineation.
There'll be more.
That's hard. That's really hard. It's like you wake up on Saturday. Is it Friday or is it Sunday? No, I think it's Saturday. And then you get down and you're like, oh God, it's Sunday. Yeah. So.
All right. One last thing. I know I said I had a last question, but that was the last one. One last thing. How would you like to be remembered?
As someone with a funny wit, a good heart, and a caring soul, and someone who gave to his community. Yeah, I think that's about it.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I think you're on your, I think you're working that whole thing right there.
Trying to, it's what you put out there that you get back.
Oh, yeah.
It's super. Sounds great.
Okay. Thank you so much for being my first interview.
Hey, I'm glad I was able to be your first interview. Thank you.
Yeah. I had to pick someone good who knew how to talk.
Yeah, well, and keep up the good work. Thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you so much. All right, you take care. Stay warm.
Will do. You too. All right. See you later, Nancy.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.